Heard it.
Good day, good day. I am Red Hawk, and we are hanging at the deep end. I'm here with my cohorts, Bob Hayes coming to us from Florida, and Marianne Rudis coming to us from Spokane Valley. I'm coming to you from Spokane proper. And today's kind of a spin-off from last week. We've been on this journey from being to life to self-consciousness, and we've even talked about where's it all going. We've explored things and processes that life cannot do without, and we continue to explore what the next step of evolution is and where it is leading us. Now, our last podcast looked at the metaphysical questions in a chat with artificial intelligence. And our chat with AI reiterated many of the same questions about existence, life, and self-awareness that we've been entertaining all along. Nothing new, really. But in our last conversation, Bob brought up some questions about AI itself. So today, I'm going to let Bob take the lead as we explore what AI is and whether it will be a benefit or a curse. So, Bob, what say you on this AI front?
Okay, thanks, Red Hawk. I'm going to try and give a little picture of the whole waterfront here in a few words to try and get us better positioned to understand what kind of questions we really need to be asking about AI. So I'm going to start with a few definitions and a little bit about my personal history with AI, and then jump into some of the major questions that we as human beings need to ask ourselves and ask each other before we leap willy-nilly into this whole world of AI. So first of all, I'm going to start with a couple of definitions. Artificial intelligence is technology that enables computers to simulate human intelligence and problem-solving capabilities. Now, by that we mean, can it simulate reason? Can it discover meaning? Can it generalize? And can it learn from past experiences? AI systems are based on a term that we've all heard, especially if we're on social media, and that's algorithms. And that is systems that model the decision-making processes that occur in the human brain. Now, as yet, the AI systems are able to do certain specific tasks pretty well, some of them better than humans, or faster at least than humans. But they have not been able to move beyond these specific tasks. So let me tell you a little bit about how I was exposed to AI over my life. Going back to the 1950s and 60s, it was through science fiction. Different science fiction writers, like Robert Heinlein, were already talking about how we would interact with computers and how we would program them and how they would begin to take on personalities of their own. And shows like Star Trek, where Captain Kirk would be able to talk to his computer, and the computer would be able to offer suggestions to him. And of course, the famous movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, where there became conflict between the computer HAL and the pilot of the spacecraft. Later on in the 60s and 70s, they tried to develop programs that could eventually beat the greatest chess players. And it took years and years for them to do that, but they finally did. When I first began dealing with AI, it was in the area that we called expert systems. And what we were trying to do was collect information and data on specific tasks that humans do and put it into a system that would then be able to advise the humans on doing those tasks. We were also looking at speech recognition, where we would be able to talk to the computer. Now, when we first got to it, we actually had to train the computers to recognize our voice. And each person would have to train his computer to recognize certain voice characteristics. Well, now we've gone way beyond that. Technology has just gone pell-mell. And we now have systems like we talked about last week, ChatGPT, which many people think is a turning point in the whole development of AI. And we now talk in terms of generative AI. This is where the system can begin to learn itself and change the way it deals with data. So we've got these technologies that are trying to simulate human intelligence. Well, what is human intelligence? This is a question that psychologists have been struggling with forever, and there's no single answer. The closest we can come is that it's a collection of many different diverse abilities. Some psychologists say, well, intelligence is what we can measure. So they use what are called IQ tests. And they have various scales that they measure, things like problem solving, things like arithmetic, things like picture completion, object assembly, things like that. And they develop scales which they can then rank people on it. And they say, okay, your intelligence, your IQ is this particular level because you can do these things in all these different areas. We've begun to also say that there's areas beyond those, things like musical intelligence, things like spatial intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence, meaning how you move your body. Is a good dancer more intelligent in kinesthetic intelligence than somebody who doesn't dance well? How about interpersonal intelligence? People who are able to interact smoothly with each other. So I'll just throw out my definition of human intelligence, and it's unique to each individual human, and it's a unique collection of skills, knowledge, and abilities. And everybody falls somewhere along that scale. Some are better at certain things, some are better at other things. So we've got these systems that are trying to simulate what humans do in a variety of different areas. But where we are now is we're beginning to let the AI systems get ahead of themselves. And there are a number of ethical questions that we need to be thinking about, discussing, and making decisions about how we create and use these systems. Some of the questions involve who's responsible for the data that's being collected and put into these systems? How does that impact our privacy? How about the transparency? Who's collecting the data? Which data are they collecting? How are they using the data? The accountability. Who's in charge and who is going to be held accountable for what happens with these systems? And finally, the one that I want to spend a little bit more time on, and that is trust. How do we trust AI systems? What aspects of our life are we willing to give up to an AI system? Are we going to let the AI system decide what information it collects and how it uses it? Are we going to put really strict reins on it and only allow it to have the data that we allow it? How about the physical world? How does the system interact with the physical world? Are we going to let an AI system have its finger on the button? Are we going to have the situation from 2001 where the pilot's talking to Hal, the computer, and saying, Hal, open the pod doors, please. And Hal says, I don't want to open the pod doors. What happens there? How much control do we allow the system to exercise in the physical world? And here's an important one, I think. What about human creativity? Are we going to let some future poet laureate be an AI system and put all the poets out of business? How about artists? Or how about a company that hires an artist to do a pamphlet for its annual report? Are they going to hire a human artist, or are they going to let the AI system do it? There's already some backlash among the artistic community, literally asking companies not to use AI because it's putting artists out of business. So we're now in the position where companies are pretty much making these decisions. They're saying, you want a new phone? Your new phone is going to have AI in it. Politicians are beginning to run on whether or not we can beat China in terms of how we develop our AI. Bernie Sanders has issued a statement that says, I'm paraphrasing, if AI is doing work faster and it's allowing people to be passed over, shouldn't the worker get some of the benefit from the AI? Shouldn't they get maybe more time off? How about this idea of generative AI? We're seeing something that's very interesting. A lot of these companies that are developing AI are laying off their software engineers because the systems are beginning to generate their own data collection and so forth. So even the people that are building AI are losing their jobs to AI. So I've hit a whole bunch of things right there, but I think the major issue is that humans have got to make decisions really soon about how we're going to use AI in the future, or the decisions are going to be taken away from us. So that's basically my introduction to the area.
Wow. And you know, I'm going to let Marianne have something to say before I jump in. Marianne, what do you have to say about this? I mean, I see this as integral to our next step of evolution, but I don't know what that step is. And I think Bob's brought up some real issues about benefits or curse. What do you say, Marianne?
Well, I think I think, Bob, you did hit on a lot. And there are a lot of pieces there. And I think what strikes me as the important conversations is, yes, it's around those ethical questions. It's who is using this data? How are they using it? How is it being collected? And you're right, we have to agree to have that data collected to use most any devices or any apps that you get, any social media platforms. You're basically saying, yes, I'm giving you access to my personal information. But then what happens with that? And I think there's also something that you didn't really touch on is this generational gap. Is some of these younger people that have grown up with this, with locker searches, with this invasion of no privacy, don't have as many qualms about the privacy issues as someone who was raised in earlier times. I remember having a conversation with my son at one point, and he said, I would rather have targeted ads. I don't mind them. I don't want to be seeing ads that I don't want. I'd rather they collect all that data and then send me what I'm interested in. The problem is when these algorithms start sending you only your own interests, you miss out on expanding and learning and growing as a human being. So, and the artist part of it too, I think the Museum of Modern Art has an exhibit of an AI, and it's creating art from all of the art that's in its database. And so then you get into copyright or, those kind of infringements and who actually owns it. Once an artist puts something out there, it's their property, it's their intellectual property, but when AI is gathering it up, what happens to that? And I think that's something that those conversations are ongoing, I think, and they need to be. Some of those, the writers' strikes and things that happened in the entertainment business, that a lot of that had to do with AI and people losing the right to their own images. And so there are a lot of ethical things, but in my mind, I love that you started out with the sci-fi world, because I can envision a Star Trek world. I can envision AI being used for the benefit of all of us, rather than for the manipulation by a few. And I think that's the balance that we're at, and those are the conversations we need to be having right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm going to draw some analogies. When cassettes first came out, recording cassettes, all of a sudden people couldn't protect their own stuff. People were making tapes, and the world had to retool itself to accommodate cassettes. Another thing that happened was synthesizers. When synthesizers happened, people were saying, well, they're going to put orchestras out of business. That's it. It basically didn't put orchestras out of business, but it allowed thousands more to participate in composition and how to put that together without having to have $1 million to put an orchestra together. So creativity kind of was greater. And I think that part of the problem we have right now, and this is an evolutionary, when you talk about moral, I see it as an evolutionary one, is we seem to want to try stuff out before we know what it can do. Bob, I mentioned to you an article in the Washington Post in the last week or so was about the LA school system, which is the second biggest school system in the country, is now having AI assistants. And what a mess, just putting that possibility. If you read the article, they start going into all the questions. Is it good? Can it be accomplished by other means? There's a whole lot of questions, and the problem is we don't know what the questions are until we've tried it out. And so it creates this interesting way of being in the world where we're having to let something have free reign without really knowing whether it is a benefit or a curse. And what we're seeing is AI is both a benefit and a curse. It depends on how we appropriate it, how we ask the questions, because again, we don't really know. How it might take a total confounding confabulation in an LA school system for us to ask the next constellation of questions. We don't really know, and I think that that's part of it. Now, I will say, I think AI is part of our future in a way that will make, Bob, you said it, even the people who are creating AI are losing their jobs to AI. That this whole concept about, AI can take over so many of the jobs we have that now, people are talking about a universal paycheck. Everybody gets a paycheck because there's not going to be enough work. And how does that work? Plumbers and electricians, they're probably going to be the cream of the crop, because AI will be able to take care of a lot of the intellectual stuff, a lot of the teaching stuff, a lot of the, and now we're putting them in robots. You talked about the kinetic, or, that body. Yeah, thank you. And now we've got these robots, and I've watched some of the experiments where they try to push them over and they catch themselves. And we're at a whole new frontier, and it's important for us to understand at least some of the implications of that. And I think that on GPS, Fareed Zakaria has had some of the leading people who've come up with this, and now they're saying we need to hold our horses a little bit. We need to be a little bit more conservative in the way we're letting this thing out of the cage, if you will. And the questions are plentiful, but again, we haven't even gotten to, I think, the most important questions yet, because AI hasn't shown us that, and that maybe is where sci-fi comes in. I think of the Terminator series, how AI has taken over. I think of the Matrix franchise, and how AI has created a whole new universe, thinking it's totally better than us, and it knows our best interests better than we do. So all of these are huge, and yet they're all part of an evolving species that is now creating an outboard brain, if you will, to allegedly assist us. And the question is it going to continue in that role, or are we going to end up assisting it? And go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I think that a term that I just kind of glazed over or passed over very quickly, and that's transparency. We need to begin to take control of how this whole development and evolution of AI is happening. We've talked in past episodes about how humans are the only species that has the ability to control, to some extent, its own evolution, at least to affect its own evolution. And I agree with you. AI systems are part of evolution, but we need to make sure we are able to control them, able to understand what they're doing. And we're already using them in the military for pattern recognition in terms of reading maps and different things like that. How much control are we willing to give them? Are we willing to let our politicians just use AI as a talking point? Or are we going to ask them to really get involved in making sure we husband AI in a way that's going to be beneficial as opposed to being a curse? And that's where I think transparency is going to go a long way. We need to have the data on how are the LA school systems using AI and how is it really affecting the students. And we've got to do it quick.
Yeah, and it is happening pretty quick. And another piece, you talked about the military. Remember the movie War Games, where the kid is just he thinks he's playing a game, but he ends up hacking into the computer? War can be prosecuted a lot faster with AI, and responses can happen. So sometimes I wonder, and we don't have a lot of time, but I want to say this: are we creating a new species, a new order of life and consciousness? And is it going to bypass us? And what would that mean? Those are sci-fi questions that are here today.
Well, and I think along those lines, too, we haven't talked about is the merging of humans and AI and the merging of humans and technology. We have artificial organs and artificial limbs, and at what point, there's tech companies that people have chips they can open doors with, and they can At what point do we start to merge our intelligence with AI on a physical level? You were talking before about out in the physical world, and I've read some pretty interesting science fiction on that too, on what that would look like and how to use it. So I think we don't know what we don't know, and so until it starts to unfold and we start to formulate these questions and then solve those problems or be able to integrate it into our lives.
And it's we don't have a lot of time left, but I want us to realize, think about what happened when we first started thinking about robotics. This was in the 50s. I remember going to more horror movies where the robots were the evil bad people. We were trying to somehow assimilate this new technology into our world. I think about radioactivity and the different monsters it created, as well as Spider-Man, and that how those, have the stories we've generated. And I think what's happening now is we're going to get more movies with AI. There's one now that's called Afraid, with AI in that Afraid, where one's personal AI system will protect the family, even if it means killing people who might embarrass them. And so we're starting to look at the questions in some new ways and with some new stories. And I think that's how we humans do. We put them in stories and we see how they, one of the things I like about Baldacci's writings is he'll say, well, what happens if one person in the Treasury was corrupt and did this? And it shows how the whole system can get corrupted. We're starting to see that with AI. So I ask our listeners, keep your ears and eyes open and realize we're on the edge of tomorrow, man, and this is not some metaphorical thing. This is like the real deal, and it's going to affect us in ways that are either going to make our lives a lot easier. I think if AI takes over a lot of these jobs, it's going to create a lot more leisure time, and it's going to be a lot more time for people to be creative and to do what their deepest dharma is, if you will, and not have to worry about, making a living at the same time. It can create a lot of wonderful things. By the way, that's the Star Trek world, where everybody can do it, there's enough. And once we have enough, then people can be allowed to have some free range on their creative stuff. And this is how the whole Industrial Revolution worked as well, by the way. And we're still in the middle of that in some very real ways. So artificial intelligence, benefits and curses, I think both right now are on the horizon, and we're trying to sort it out. So final comments, Marianne?
I think we're at a time right now where, yes, these conversations, we have to address our fears, our collective fears about it. And at the same time, entertain the possibilities of what it can be. And I think that's where we're at right now. It's, the whole idea of what could go wrong and what can go right. And I think that's where we are, and we have to just keep working it out, talking about it, because you're right, it's not going away.
Amen. Bob, final comments?
I'll make a final recommendation, and that is that every school in the country, every school child should be having these kind of discussions at whatever level they're appropriate. But if we're not an informed population, then we're going to lose our control of AI. We need to be able to be well informed enough to make the right decisions that keeps AI as a benefit, not as a curse.
Amen.
And that's that transparency piece that you talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've just scratched the surface here. AI, we think of AI in virtual terms, but it's not. It's reality central, and it's coming online one way or the other. So, the whole concept of keeping track and staying tuned into this part of life, I think, is huge. So where do we go from here? And all these things, from the simplest beginning of religion and animism, all the way to the deep complexities of esoteric realities and religion, there is this amazing sequence of activities involving gestures, words, actions, or revered objects. And Bob, you and I actually wrote a paper on this together when we were in college. Rituals. What is ritual? How does it play into our human consciousness, and what does it do? How does it create a way for us to take the next step, if you will? And I think this is going to be huge, because even with AI and everything else, oh my Lord, ritual's going to be there. Whatever happens, we're going to ritualize it. We are going to create some way of putting it in our axis mundi, our central way of organizing our love, our society, our government. Ritual. It's huge. We're going to go there, and we hope you'll join us. Until then, my friends, blessing. Keep your eyes and ears open, and remember, AI chat is right at your fingertips. Blessings.